So initial dispatch was to a trailer fire. Didn't specify whether it was mobile home or just a regular trailer until more information came in. My thoughts en route after they said possibility of still one person in was, okay, we may have a rescue, but again, what type of trailer do we have? Mobile home or camp trailer? There was only one caller on it, the initial call. When I hit about Payne Drive, I got some more information from dispatch that LCSO was on scene, saying that they had a mobile home that was well involved. At that point, I contacted the duty chief to let him know that we could possibly have a rescue going on, depending on what I found when I got there. When I was probably half mile out, I could see the glow in the sky, and I knew we had a working fire. I got on scene, and my initial thoughts when I did my drive-by 360, or my drive-by 3 sides, was it was a single-wide mobile home, and it had fire blowing out of every window that I could see. It wasn't until I did my 360 that I found out it was a double-wide, and I had fire on the Alpha Bravo window just blow out of it, and at that point I knew it was untenable for anybody to survive in that, and we were not going to make a rescue. At that point, I made it defensive. I finished up my 360, and I made contact with the occupant that escaped the building and confirmed that one was inside with possibility of a dog. When I was doing my 360, I noticed the power drop coming in, and it was going to be compromised very soon. So I had got utilities coming quickly, and then let all the other incoming units know.
Which side was that on?
That would have been the Bravo Charlie corner of the building. I made contact with the truck when they got on scene and did a face-to-face with them and with Medic 31 to let them know that we were going to be unable to attack the fire on that side until we got the power secured. At that point, Lieutenant Adamson grabbed the pre-connect, and they began stringing hose to the Delta Charlie side to make fire attack from there. Medic 31 grabbed a hand line and went to just the Alpha side and was able to make initiate fire suppression there.
Who was on Medic 31?
Lieutenant Kroll and Firefighter Hu. Would I have done anything different? No, there was nothing I could have done. You replay it in the back of your head. Could we have made a VES? No, there was. If we would have been there 5 minutes, 10 minutes earlier, or right when the initial call came in, yeah, we probably could have done something. But it was a 1970s trailer, and there was nothing we can do about it.
Water supply, how did that go?
Water supply.
Did you formally assign that?
I did not formally assign a water supply officer. What I wanted to do was set up a nurse tender shuttle, or not a nurse tender, but a water shuttle operation. But we didn't have any other tenders besides Water Tender 32 coming in. So at that point, I decided this was going to be a water tender or a nurse tender evolution, and I called for 2 more tenders, one coming out of SIO, one coming out of Sweet Home. I can't recall the time that Pumper Tender 31 went en route, but it didn't change my decision after that. It was defensive. It wasn't something that we were going to be dumping thousands of gallons of water on, that we needed to set up a water supply.
Did you call for Fire Corps at all for the roommate or?
Rehab 31 responded just as the first alarm assignment, and Joy from Fire Corps, who was on call that night, responded on her own due to the first alarm assignment. So I didn't have to make contact with Fire Corps. I made contact with the fire chief once I got on scene to let him know that we had a fatality, and at that point we were trying to get a hold of DFM or fire marshal. County was already on scene. Like I said, they give the initial, hey, we do have a fire. They had already made contact and started collecting information from the resident that escaped the building.
You got there?
So when we first arrived on scene, we saw fire coming out the roof on the Charlie side, on the Alpha side.
What were your first initial orders?
My first initial orders were we had to deploy around the back of the structure to the Charlie side. The structure was right up on the road, so there was no area to fight it from the front, plus a lot of the fires in the back. We had to go in a field on the Delta and hop a fence to get on the Charlie side because there was a power line concern.
Oh, okay.
So we had to extend off 300 feet of 1 3/4 to get to where we needed to go.
So did you just use the hose bundles then? Or?
So yeah, we took one of the cross lays off the truck, had Joel pull it around to the Delta side, and then extended off 2 at first. So because we had an exposure, an RV exposure, which I also had one of the firefighters search for, do a primary search on. Protected that and knocked it down. And then once we were able to knock it down a little bit from the back, then we extended off another 100 so we could make it all the way to the Alpha side to start doing some more fire attack too. Because in that fire we had the roof on the Charlie, where we had to spray water from, was collapsed when we got there. So and then we had to pull like tin sheeting off the side skirts because a lot of the fire was underneath the house too, and just tight corners, just all in the grass and mud stuff.
Any water issues at all?
So our water issue was the fact that we were out on a medical call when we got this call. So we had truck 34 was out on. We were assisting medic 31. So we had the truck that was first due on scene, and then our second due engine was on a medic unit. So we had initially just the water on the truck to deal with. That's why we went with 1 3/4 because limited water. We didn't know when we were getting our next water supply, and it was fully involved by then. It was just exposure protection that our main primary concern was. So aside from just not having enough to facilitate our operations, like our engineer did a great job. There was a lot of good communication. They had nurse tending operations.
Who was the engineer?
That was Casey Top.
Okay. And so you responded initially in truck 31 then?
Truck 34. Yeah, just because we were out. We just cleared from a medical call. Actually, we're on a medical call when that came through.
Okay. So how long was it before you got a primary search?
On the main house,
Mm-hmm.
well, it was fully involved. So we were really never able to do a full search of the inside, mainly because the metal truss system of that trailer was collapsed in areas. The support cinder blocks that were holding it up were cracked, and you had tin roof on the whole structure, and it was slumped down all over the top. So, Ken Foster had a Traco come out, and they actually had to pick the tin roof off the house so we could actually see inside of it. And it wasn't until then we were actually able to find the first victim. So once they got all that out.
And you found the victim, or was it?
So it was like Jimin. He was breaking up some of the material so we could cool it off. We were just in the mop-up stage, and that's when he located it by sifting through some of the debris because the victim was so burnt, and it just blended in with the materials that were burnt. So
Whereabouts was the victim?
it was center of the Charlie side of the structure. There was actually a porch and some steps that we tore out, I believe, to a back door, I'm guessing. And it was just right up against the edge of the frame of the house.
How things went?
So when we arrived on scene, we pulled a little bit past the driveway, and we went ahead and I got my pumping gear, obviously, and they pulled one of the 1 3/4 lines and took that around the Alpha Bravo corner, and then Jay took the second cross lay and took that around the Delta Charlie corner, and took the 2 house bundles off of that. So he had, I want to say, 250 feet extended off of that, and then they had the other 150 feet on the other side. So initially we were able to get water to them smoothly at quick pressures, but they were flowing about 320 gallons per minute, and I think the truck's only 460. So it didn't last very long, but in that time we were able to get hooked up to JP on water tender 32 and get his water. We were starting to break everything down and pull everything off of the unit when engine 35 arrived, and people happened to put them
kind of right where I was going to set up my porta tank. And at that point, JP was out of water, so we disconnected him, and we were going to hook up to engine 35. Hooked up to engine 35, and for whatever reason, their pump would not engage, so they were unable to pump me water to me. By that time, pumper tender 31 had arrived. We were able to get engine 35 out of the way, get the pumper tender in, and they had enough water for me to help me actually be able to get the other tenders we had en route coming in the correct series and actually get them in the right order so that they could just come in and nurse tend me by driving up to the supply line that I had established. So once we got past the pumper tender, water was pretty uninterrupted at that point. We had 4 tenders for a little while, and then we dropped to 3 until about the end of the fire. So.
Any takeaways? Anything that you learned?
I've learned that 460 gallons doesn't get you very far. So, it's one of those things where you got to really make sure you have the right resources coming, and if at all possible, bringing the right resource to it. Unfortunately, we were on a car wreck, so we had to go straight from a car wreck to the fire. So we didn't have an opportunity to grab something else, but making sure that you call ahead and get those tenders, that you need coming. One of the things that Jay and I kind of talked about was I kept saying truck 34 pump when I was on the fire. Just saying, hey, water supply instead. Makes it a little easier. Everybody knows who's talking rather than having to try and say truck 34 pump, the tank crew, or, it's just long and winded. So just saying, hey, water supply to so-and-so, I think that would have helped smooth the process and help with communication.
Did you stay on the same frequency the whole time?
I did, and that was the other thing you said, is maybe switching to Fire 4.
Establish water supply.
Yeah, just establish water supply and switch to Fire 4 so they don't have to hear my traffic. Because while it wasn't a super involved fire as far as communication goes, you could end up with one where the airways need to be clear a little bit more and going, hey, tender 91, you can go ahead and back up there. It just clogs that up, so I think it'd be good to move it onto Fire 4.
All right, thanks, Casey.
Yeah.
All right, so you were alerted by, sounds like, duty chief.
Duty chief called me, let me know that we had a fire working and that it was a fatal. Assumed fatal at that point in time. So I responded from my home. It was just a few minutes away. I probably got there about a half hour after the crews initially arrived.
What time would you say that was?
Probably about 12:30,
Okay.
roughly.
All right, and then so you weren't able to dig it, so they decided to hold off until the morning.
Yeah, the dig didn't start until we did briefing at 7 o'clock.
Okay, and so during the night, just due to the fact that you said the materials, can you describe the roofing materials that were blocking that again, that came down?
So basically, it was a double-wide mobile home that had the initial roof of the double-wide, and then they had built another roof over the top of it, assumably because they had a lot of leaks and whatever in the initial structure. So there was actually 2 layers of tin on it. Most of that had collapsed. Some of it prior to them arriving, and then shortly after them being there. And so there was 60 foot of 2 layers of tin that they were trying to work through, and with the availability of people and time frames and whatever, it just wasn't working.
So then, was it you or John who got a hold of Lynn County?
So I got a hold of the Lynn County supervisor for SIO. He was on site. They were doing traffic control for us. So I went down and talked to him, had a conversation with him, asked him if there was any possibilities we could get a track hoe or a backhoe, something with a thumb on it that we could bring in and remove the material. Lynn County was awesome to work with. He made a phone call, told me he could have somebody there in an hour. They brought out a 30,000-pound track hoe with a thumb. The operator of that was very meticulous. I shared with him exactly what we were working with and what we wanted to do and how we needed to protect everything from my investigation. He went in, he was able to grab the tin off of that thing and pick it up and move it out of the way so we could get to it to actually put the fire out, the rest of the fire out, and salvaged what he could of my investigation. So they were probably only there for about 45 minutes. It went really quick. So, and that opened up everything to where we could actually get it completely extinguished so that I could move on with the investigation.
So in lines of the investigation, was it who all helped with the investigation?
So I had made contact with OERS to get the state involved. State duty chief called me, and we set up to get somebody down at our briefing at 7 o'clock at 34. Had a detective from Lynn County because of the death. He was at our briefing as well. And then I had 4 team members, outfit team members, including myself, that went out and did the dig. We did a briefing at 7 o'clock. We were back on site at 8. We had Lynn County Sheriff hold the scene for us. I don't think crews left until about 6 by the time they got done with everything. So Lynn County only held it for a couple hours, but they secured the scene for us. We went out and started with photos and mapping and that kind of stuff while we were waiting on the coroner to get there.
So it sounded like his roommate was there, was able to give you some information on what he saw.
So yeah, basically the deceased lived in the front of the trailer in the living room next to the wood stove, and then the live-in roommate lived in the northwest corner, which would have been the Bravo Charlie corner of the structure. His report was that he had watched the baseball game that night. At the end of the baseball game, which I have not looked up yet, but I'm assuming it was around 10 o'clock, 10:30. He went to sleep. He has a dog, a cattle dog that sleeps with him. Said he was awakened to the dog barking and screaming from Frank, the deceased. He said the scream was not normal. It was very, very much a distressed call. Said he got out of bed, went to his door and into the hallway of the mobile home. It was a hoarder house, so he got halfway down the hallway and realized that the hallway is not something that they've used for a long time. The last stretch of the hallway was inaccessible. He said at that point in time he's getting hit with all the heat, the smoke. You can see a glow at the end of the hallway. So he went back. There was a door that went to the north that went through the kitchen and out to the back door.
Would that have been the Delta side then, or the
Charlie side.
Charlie
Would have been
side.
the Charlie side.
Okay.
So he exited out the Charlie side, out the back door. As he went through the kitchen, he could see the main body of the fire in what he described as the dining area. Between the kitchen, dining, and living room, it was all kind of an open concept. So that's where he saw the main body of the fire. The screams from the deceased had quit at that point in time. He hollered for him, tried to figure out where he was at. He described that the screams initially were coming from the front of the house, which is the living room area, which is where Frank lived, essentially. Left the house, knew that there was nothing else he could do there, ran to the neighbor's house to call 911, and then got a hold of us, and that's when we showed up. So.
And the investigation itself, what are your thoughts there?
So with the investigation, because of the damage, I mean, essentially all of the wall structures except for a little bit on the alpha side were completely gone. So we had nothing to pattern off of. We had the roof removed because it was sitting on top of the floor. So there was nothing we can do pattern-wise on the roof. The main floor of the structure, there was multiple places where it was burnt through. In the area that he described the main body of the fire initially, there was a 6-foot hole in the floor. Where the victim was found on the Charlie side, roughly about 3 feet inside the back door. He was found laying on his back, face up. He was found with an extinguisher next to him that had erupted. And so our theory is that he couldn't make it down the hallway to get to Ted. He couldn't make it through the kitchen, which is where he normally would have come out because of the bulk of the fire being there. So our assumption is that he came out the front door and somehow missed Ted leaving to go to the neighbor's house and came back into the back door with an extinguisher to try and do something with the fire. Got in and was overcome by smoke and collapsed. As far as the investigation itself, we weren't able to actually do a dig. Everything was exterior, the walk around perimeter. We took photos, did diagrams. The wood stove is definitely one of those things that is a possibility. It was described by Ted, the live-in, that he commonly was complaining to Frank that he kept too much combustible storage basically right up against the stove, cardboard, paper, that kind of stuff. Sounds like Frank is the one, the deceased is the one that dealt with the fire. He would routinely put pieces of wood that were too big into the fireplace and leave the door open and just feed it as it burnt off. The door was closed and latched at this particular point in time, but it doesn't sound like he had a lot of concern about the fire, I guess. So that is definitely one of our hypotheses. The other one is that they did some really creative electrical work. It was a 1970s trailer with aluminum wiring in it. Frank, the owner, the deceased, was concerned about the aluminum wiring, and so they shut all of the breakers on the panel off. It sounds like they did it themselves, but they wired copper wire from the main feed from the power company into the panel box and hooked to 3 new breakers, put in 4 or 5 plugs, and then ran extension cords and power strips and daisy chained everything together. I think we probably found 50 extension cords that were daisy chained to power strips and other extension cords. So because of the damage, we weren't able to rule out the electrical either. So those are our 2 main hypotheses. We've ruled it accidental, undetermined.